see. Yeah.
This is literally the first time ever in the history of me doing the podcast that I'm taking orders from somebody else.
Yeah.
Your journey is absolutely inspirational.
I scrambled my way up the ladder, put my hand out, started walking, and realized he's like 50 paces away.
Had you already caught the Four Seasons bug by this point?
Raging with it. I was full of it. He told me I'm a failure, and he said I'm not going to achieve anything in life.
And a huge hospitality meets welcome to Simon Casson. How are you?
Delighted to be here, Phil, on a sunny London day at Corinthia London. So what better place to be?
Well, I don't know if I might be a bit more delighted to be here than you, because we're sat in one of your amazing hotel bedrooms, rooms within rooms. Tell us about the property.
So yeah, this was really a transformational property for Corinthia Group, because this is the first, truly global luxury hotel that we developed, and the group developed as the real estate investor. So participated in a bid with the Crown Estate, about 15 years ago, and then opened this hotel, which really became a game changer. Pretty a bold move, I would say, for Corinthia, because luxury hotels and ones that had hundreds of millions of pounds of investment, as this did, were typically clustered in Knightsbridge and Mayfair, and so Whitehall, really, you're going to be able to do a luxury hotel there. And I think sort of time has proved the concept that, we now have other luxury hotels sprouting up around us. And this hotel's not only been a great commercial success, but has played a really important role in the narrative of Corinthia and its aspiration to be a global luxury player.
Fantastic. You've done your homework. That's good to see.
I had to do that before I chose to join the group, right?
Well, indeed. Yeah, good to see that it stuck, though, a year and a half-ish on, are we now?
Just over a year. I started in March, so yeah, a little bit over a year.
Right, yeah. Very good. Well, I mean, obviously there's a bit of a story before that in terms of how you arrived there. So take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
Simon, listen, we all have a story and we all have a journey, and I think mine's probably pretty well hackneyed, and it's not that it's particularly special other than it is to me, it's mine, but in hospitality, probably not an uncommon story. I was pretty average at school, left school 15, my birthday's in August, so I was 15 when the O-level year finished, and I remember getting a call from the careers director, come down, and knock on the door, Casson, sit down. I'm like, yes. He said, Casson, you're a failure. You've failed all your GCSEs, and this is the end of education for you. And I said, well, so maybe I thought I might like to do A-levels or something like that. He said, no, it's over. He said, think about, learning to fix cars or join the army. And I left there thinking, really, goodness, this is not great. I knew, of course, it was not a surprise to me that I wasn't academically excellent, but I didn't think that my education would finish there. And I went home, and my parents were separated at that time, living with my mum. She was a radiographer, but worked a bar job in the evenings to make ends meet. So I was waiting for her to come home, and I said, Mummy, I had the big chat with the careers officer, and he told me I'm a failure, and he said I'm not going to achieve anything in life. And we all have these moments, these inflection points in life, and my mum sort of put her arms around me and said, Simon, you're special. You're going to be a leader of men. You're going to achieve great wealth and success, and I believe in you. And at that moment, it's just a mother's love, right? She didn't know, but, when the whole world's saying, no, you can't, you really just need one person to say, yes, I believe in you, you can. And for me, that was my mum. So that's how it started. And I started washing dishes in a local restaurant, staying in a room above that they gave me. And from those humble beginnings, I scrambled my way up the ladder.
Yeah, the rest is history. Thanks very much. Good to have you on the show.
Chat. It's a pleasure.
The interesting thing about that for me is that I think that that's probably still something that goes on today in schools, is that the people who are deemed not necessarily academically wonderful, who's speaking to them in terms of what's your direction? That the world has not finished now. The world is just getting started for you. So it's interesting that I still think. What was that, maybe 5-6 years ago, Simon, when you were back then?
Yeah, probably 45 years ago.
That probably not much has changed, really, which is quite alarming, I think.
Well, it's sad, it's given me a real heart for education, honestly. I've been on the board of various universities. I ended up getting honorary degrees and things like that, and I have 3 amazing children that all did really well academically. My youngest daughter went to Oxford and got a first from Oxford. So in one cycling generation, it can turn around. But it really requires, teachers that care as within any business, it requires you to have mentors and people working around you that genuinely care about you and want to help you grow. And it's really given me an imperative, particularly later, and at this point, in the late autumn of my career, what's most meaningful and important is helping other people grow, helping people develop, helping companies and the human capital within them be better than they might be without my influence.
So you started washing dishes, living in a room upstairs.
Yeah.
How did things move on from there?
I don't think I've been any happier since, in those halcyon days where you're earning like 30 quid a week or whatever, and, you're getting free meals and a room and you're in this exciting environment. But for sure, as I was washing the dishes, I loved the sort of heat and buzz of the kitchen. I also loved what was happening on the other side. The doors open and you see people dressed nicely, pulling up in nice cars, celebrating family moments. And it definitely gave me a vision for what I want to do in the future, which was be part of what I saw then as the restaurant business. That was all that I knew. And I thought one day if I could manage a restaurant, that would be, amazing. So I went from there and did what was called a management training scheme, but it was really a sort of cheap labor scheme. I worked in sort of 6 hotels over 2 years in the south of England, but places like Oakley Court, Eastwell Manor, also the Livermead Cliff in Torquay. They were small hotels, but they were part of a burgeoning era in the mid-'80s of this country house hotel phenomenon, and it really attracted me, and it started making me be exposed to luxury, to wealth and affluence on the guest side and how we serve them. So over those 2 years, I was an overnight breakfast chef, I was a receptionist, I was a cocktail bar, I was waiter, and I was housekeeping. So not a lot of management training, but actually yes, because I was learning by observing. And at the end of that, again, small inflection points, they chose Management Trainee of the Year, and I was awarded Management Trainee of the Year, and a guy went in our trade magazine, Caterer and Hotel Keeper, and a guy called Kit Chapman, who owned the castle at Taunton, and he still owns, and his family run the castle at Taunton, saw my picture and then contacted me and said, hey, come and work at the castle. Castle, small country house hotel with a young lad called Gary Rhodes who just joined as the chef. And he was, 20, I was 19, who's this spiky head, irreverent genius of chef. Even then, completely unknown. And it was really through Kit and the castle and friends like Keith Floyd and other luminaries of that early part of the industry used to come and sort of developed, a TV career for Gary. But, for me to be part of that, part of seeing this sort of emergence of Great British cooking, partly through the Chapman family, learning about luxury, learning about wine, it was just, and it has never stopped, another chapter in my ongoing education. After about 2 years, Kit said to me, he called to me his office, he said, Simon, you're special, you have a talent. I'm like, I know, Mama told me, right? So I didn't forget that. He said, but you've got to work for internationally. And he said, the greatest hotel company in the world is Four Seasons. He said, but they're very small. They have 12 hotels and they're all in North America except one in London. So I'm going to write to the GM in London, Ramon Pajares, and recommend some names. Ramon was legendary, and I just had the privilege of giving a eulogy at his funeral, last year, but was and became one of the legends of our industry. So in the late 80s, I joined Four Seasons. And that, again, very much an inflection point because it gave me, I guess, a canvas upon which to paint the story of my career over what turned out to be the following 35 years. Yeah,
well, we'll come on to Four Seasons, obviously, because it's played a tiny little part in your career so far. But I really want to focus on just that development period where you're in the learning zone. And who do you become if you don't have these people around you that obviously they did see something in you as well. I'm guessing as well that your attitude is that I'm in somewhere where I'm enjoying being. Yeah. Talk to me about the influences early on in your career and kind of how important, looking back now, how important they actually were for you.
Well, you asked me what do you become without them, and I would say simply a bit less. I think, we're all masters of our own destinies, and, we all have to polish our own diamond and nurture and grow whatever talent we have if we choose to do that, if we have that drive and ambition. But without so many people along the way that for me were luminaries, were mentors, were examples, were role models, were aspirational. That, I remember, being in the castle. I was the assistant manager in the hotel, but there was a GM and me, and that was the management. So I'd be running the restaurant. I remember having Kit Chapman having dinners with, the Roux brothers and, Michael Caine from Gidley Park, and I'm the waiter at those tables. And I remember standing there thinking, I want to be sitting at that table, one day. I want to be part of these interesting, of course, eating the beautiful food and the amazing wines they were drinking. And that sort of aspiration, a bit of maybe jealousy or desire to be part of that, becomes a kicker, And so Kit was definitely an early influence, as was Gary, because Gary had an energy and a drive and an ambition that was uncommon, and a funny, humorous irreverence that came with it. And then as I joined Four Seasons, different world, then a different sort of set of possibilities open, a world that I didn't really know existed, both in the travel and living all over the world, as I subsequently did, as well as the caliber of people that I was exposed to.
Yeah. So talk to me about that I suppose, culture shock, really, in terms of going from small family-run businesses into, I suppose they were still quite small in the grand scheme of things back then, but bigger than what you were used to.
Well, it was London for a start, and that was exciting to be coming to live in the capital. But, I'd been essentially running the castle day to day, along with the GM. But on his days off, I was the GM, and I came to Four Seasons, and I'm the assistant manager at the front desk. And the front desk is part of front office, which is part of rooms division, which reports into a hotel manager, reports to the GM. So suddenly, from being a big fish in a small pond, I was a minnow, and had to again recalibrate and think, okay, how am I going to fit into this, and how am I going to drive myself to success? And now I've come into this, much more competitive field. I guess it's like if I was playing Sunday League football and suddenly you get thrown into a Premier League team. You know what the game is, you know how to play, but everything's different. The caliber of people around you are different. The environment, the big hotel on Park Lane. So it was intimidating and scary, for sure, but also it started to open up this world for me. Wow, there's more. Firstly, thinking that I could maybe live abroad, and thinking that, maybe I can actually one day be a general manager of a hotel like this. It started to ignite a higher level of ambition within me.
Right, yeah.
Because I just didn't know it existed before.
Yeah. Indeed, I suppose you don't know what you don't know, the old cliche. Mm-hmm. Can't get through a show without having a cliche in there somewhere. Talk to me about, I will move through your career at some point, but I'm really intrigued by the formative years of somebody's career, because that's where you do a lot of your mistake making, right? So, and what I love about certainly my limited experience of speaking to you so far, away from here as well, and in the chats that we've had, is that you definitely have this natural way about you where you acknowledge the fact that you've done quite well in your career, but you're also quite open to the fact that
it's quite well.
All right. It's gone aggressive now. Yeah, I'm scared now. So this is maybe one of the reasons why I even started this podcast in the first place, because the route to the top is rarely straight and true. And the thing that I think brings a lot of reality to people who are inspired by other people's journeys are actually the things that haven't gone so well. In those formative years, were there any hilarious mistakes where you just look back and go, God, how did I get away with that, or anything like that?
Well, there were no mistakes because they were all meant to happen. There was plenty of
you should be in politics.
Plenty of failures, and I think an important place to start with that, and again, particularly at this point in my life, and as you had to sit there and you're CEO of a company, what was very prevalent and important to talk about was anxiety and self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and wondering and worrying, am I good enough? Okay, Mum told me I'm special, I can do it, but she's Mum, so probably a bit biased. And now I'm in this very competitive field, I was putting myself under immense pressure, and that, caused a lot of, challenges to myself, and, no one talked about mental health in those days. But I remember really being fractured and broken at times because I had told everyone I was going to be really successful, all my family and friends, and I was no doubt an annoying youngster and, late teenager and early in my 20s. I was, talking myself into a game that was yet to be played. And as I started getting into it and realized it's really hard. A tangible example, I had a great hotel manager in London in the early days called Robert Chima. He's just retired from Four Seasons now. And he came and, he's an American, a very formal London hotel. He came in like a breath of fresh air. Firstly, it was Robert, not Mr. Chima. And he had an energy and a drive that for me was intoxicating. And he promoted me to be room service manager. And I was in the front desk. I'd done food and beverage before at the castle. But I walked into room service, and it was a team of 40 people in the department,
Wow.
all men, all Portuguese, and they all had like really big mustaches. I was like 23. I didn't start shaving till I was 25. I was a late developer.
Looks like you forgot to
So,
say that.
well, a little. I mean, now I'm proud of it. So I walked in and, was really intimidated and scared, like, how am I going to run this? But because of inexperience and immaturity, I started managing rather than leading, because I didn't really know what leading was. So managing was telling them what to do, reorganizing the schedule, calibrating our processes, how we did the glasses, how we cleaned the trolleys, redoing the tip system and including myself in the tips. I had no money. I thought, well, they're making all these tips. I will include myself in the pot of tips. Union Hotel, they all walked out.
Right.
Out on the street. Casson out, Casson out.
My God.
And I'm like, is this a podcast we can swear on or not?
Yeah, you be yourself.
I was like, fuck, this is over. Like my whole career, I remember going home and talking to my wife at the time and bursting into tears as soon as I walked in. I said, I've blown it. It's over. I remember going back to work and Robert Chima saying to me, this moment's going to be the making of you if you choose to learn in the moment. And learning definitely involved, an element of humbleness, but also an element of realizing, first time for me to see there is a difference between leading and managing. And Robert explained and demonstrated this. I mean, managing is I'm room service manager. It said so on my business card, so I can tell you what to, I'm the boss. Leading is recognizing that these guys who are in their 60s have been in that department for 30 years. They've seen a dozen of me come through. Leading would be sit down and say, listen, I'm just the latest one in the line. Who was the best one you ever had and why? Who was the worst and why? What works in this department? What would you do if you imagine? By the way, where are you from? What's it like being an immigrant into the UK? You have family, how often do you get back to Portugal? I did none of those things because I thought I was just there to manage, and I tried so hard managing that I failed because I did no leading. And I'm so thankful in retrospect that happened really early in my career, because it gave me an opportunity to realize that it's all about leadership, firstly, and secondly, leadership has to be rooted in humanity. It has to be rooted in kindness. It has to be anchored in a sense of really being interested in other people, really caring about their stories. And that's something that little kernel started developing and has become a hallmark for me of how I've led, and I guess a hallmark of my leadership, and to what I'm doing today as CEO of Corinthia.
Yeah, the cracking story. Do you think that that's important, that almost necessary, I guess then, that everybody kind of has to experience that moment whereby, on the one hand, you're out of your depth because you've never led a department like that before, very different group of people than perhaps you're used to leading in the past. But it's an inevitable part of anybody's journey who's looking to progress, that you're going to find a moment in your career where you're in that.
Yeah. I think it inevitably comes. We'd all rather it didn't, because it's not comfortable, it's not nice, and it's scary, and it's existentially threatening to your being when you taste failure. But again, years and life, come to show you the power in pain, and that your most meaningful moments of growth come through your most challenging moments. You're refined in that fire of defeat and failure and self-doubt. or you're not, or you fail. And
Yeah, yeah.
of course, there'll be some people that maybe don't get interviewed because they never progressed, beyond that. Thankfully, I had people around me like Robert Schumer who believed in me and were able to use that moment of failure to be a core learning moment in my development.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that. So what happens next? You're room service manager, getting your head around the world of leadership.
Learned a lot and worked ridiculously hard. I was working probably 18 hours a day. I was getting in there at 5 in the morning. I was leaving late at night, getting 3 or 4 hours sleep because, again, hadn't learned that leadership is a collective thing. Managing a department is not one person, but I wanted to be on top of everything. So, working way too many hours to be healthy, but it was the only way that I really knew, how to be successful. And then at a certain point, the company said, we want to move you to America. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. Because Four Seasons was North American. Had no hotels outside Canada and North America, apart from this one in London. And so, in 93, I moved, newly married, to Washington, D.C. and became the front office manager of Four Seasons Washington, D.C. and spent the next decade in the States.
Right. So arrival in US and at Washington. How did it progress from there? And I suppose before we get into that, had you already caught the Four Seasons bug by this point, do you think?
I was raging with it. I was full of it because, part of, my ability to succeed is that I go all in. Probably a bit blindly, but it was such an easy culture to fall into because, Isidore Sharp, who founded the company, was and still is at 94 an amazing man, but he was an unusual life force, and he was running the company as CEO, and I'd have interactions with him, and he built this company on an unusual precept that is on people, on a culture of humanity, on a principle of treating others as you wish to be treated, and that was preeminent, ahead of profit, ahead of product, ahead of guest experience, ahead of stakeholder needs, way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And he was serious about that. Executives that didn't live up to that golden rule, he let go. And in the early days, he let go nearly half of his senior leadership team because they weren't taking seriously. But he just had a sense that to be an enduring success, you must base your company on strong foundations of humanity and of people. And so it was an easy culture to fall into. It was intoxicating.
I can only imagine. And probably the aspirational culture that every organisation looks for these days. So I can only imagine back then, and now I kind of understand why everybody looked from the outside, looking at Four Seasons going, I might want to get involved in that.
Looks attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, listen, candidly, 35 plus years later, what I'm doing now with Corinthia is essentially what, Izzy did with Four Seasons 30 plus years ago. We're a small challenger company, and, the sort of tenets of success and the foundations upon which I'm building are very much gratefully borrowed from how Izzy established and grew Four Seasons. One is because it's pretty much all I know, and secondly, because I saw it work.
Yeah, well, there's no accounting for experience, right?
Yeah.
So how did you start progressing through the ranks in North America? And I'm guessing this is where your travelled accent has come from as well.
I think so, yeah, because I certainly, of course in America they all thought I had a British accent, but when I come back now 30 years later to live in the UK, no one thinks I'm a Brit. I'm a northern guy. I was born in Carlisle, I'm almost Scottish.
Don't go that far.
Close by. For me, it was seeing the opportunity. Now I'm in America. Now I see where these are the center of Four Seasons world. And again, everyone says, you've had a great career, you've done, really well. It's important to recognize that okay, where I am now here, most people would like to be because it looks nice, and it is. I don't work anywhere near as hard today as I've worked in the past. But are you prepared to do what it took to get from here to here? Because again, I missed the first 3 beautiful kids. I was pretty absent during the first 10 years of their life because I was massively focused on work. I was incredibly ambitious, and I was insecure and doubting of myself as someone who didn't have an education. I hid the fact that I didn't have a university degree because I wasn't sure, will they allow me to become a general manager? Until the time when I became the youngest GM in 4 Seasons, that I decided to start telling my story. That was the deal with myself.
Right.
If you get to be a GM, then start telling your story to inspire others who maybe have had a similar journey. So I worked really hard, learned, observed. I was front desk manager, front office manager, then became rooms director over that decade. A great decade in America. It was the Clinton decade, and we were in Washington, D.C. I was at Bill's 50th birthday party. You felt like the whole world was happening in DC. These motorcades, all the heads of state. It was incredibly exciting. But in terms of a hothouse grad school, was tough. GM Stan Bromley, legend in North America amongst hoteliers, and every day was psychological warfare to prove to him that you could succeed.
Really?
It was
even in a humanity first culture. Because the managers, vicious in how you drive unreasonable expectations, but to all the people, he was like the father of the hotel. He was like Santa Claus. Right.
And that's how, and Izzy set up this culture of, let's treat each other, we want to be treated. It's not just sitting in a circle holding hands and singing Kumbaya. That is accompanied by an unreasonable pursuit of excellence, an unreasonable expectation of what you're going to do and how you're going to deliver, really serious about results. So a really driven business model in terms of what are the outcomes, but allow it to be fun while you do it, and be kind to each other as you go through this. And that was tough often for people to understand. Well, hold on, my boss is really demanding of me. That's not the golden rule. Well, it is part of the golden rule, because that's what I also expect of myself. But I learned huge amount about details of service. I mean, we had, every celebrity, because you have Kennedy Center honors, and then you have World Bank meetings, and then you have all the heads of state visit that come to the White House, and Four Seasons was at the epicenter of that. So I got to meet incredible world leaders and all the entertainers I'd admired, and then deliver on the service details to manage those visits. So it was a rich time of growth.
Yeah, that stage of your journey raises quite a lot of questions, none of which are probably relevant for this podcast, but I'm going to go there anyway, which is really centered around, what is the right way or the wrong way to build your career, right? If you've set an objective whereby you want to eradicate the story, which you're only telling yourself, probably the rest of the world wouldn't really care if you're good enough at your job. Yeah. But then you have the element of, I'm going to sacrifice an awful lot of other things to stay on this kind of single-minded, almost bloody-minded approach to your career. On the one hand, somebody could look at that and go, well, that's stupid because you're neglecting your family. Excuse me. On the other side, you could say it's genius because look at you now, kind of thing. It's. I suppose maybe it's a question that just goes round in everybody's head. Is there a right or a wrong way to do it? I suppose the answer is no. There's only your way.
Yeah, I think it's a distinct and long and winding road for everyone. And had I known better, and I would have done better. But I didn't know any other way than just working exceptionally hard. Do I wish I'd been more present when the kids were young? Of course I do. But then, if you'd have put in front of me, you can be more present, but you won't be such a success. Okay, I love you kids, but I also want to be successful, because that's ended up defining their lives as they were born in America and lived around the world and have been exposed, to this. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. I think we all do the best that we can. I think what's important is, do you evolve and learn? Because I'm a completely different leader and manager in many ways today than I was then, in how I treat people, in how I express ambition, in the amount of hours that I work. And as you develop the capacity to work smart and strategically versus just working hard and long hours. So I think it's important that you evolve, but I don't think there's a right or wrong way, and I don't regret any of it, because I know I was doing the best that I could do in those moments. And also kids grow up, now I have, then I have 30, 28 and 26. I was speaking to my daughter this morning, and they're amazing human beings, and we have a warm, close, really tight-knit relationship. So whatever happened in those early years, they've either forgotten or we've been able to overcome.
Yeah. And probably the lesson here is that for any kind of mass success that you want, there is probably some sacrifice.
It's got to be cost, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're a sportsman or a general in the military or a simple hotelier, if you want to end up managing and leading at scale, that has a consequence on your time and energy.
Yeah, but as you quite rightly say, time can solve a lot of issues in the sense, and what may have been an issue, it may not have been an issue back in the day.
I don't think they really missed it. They didn't know better. They had a mum who was a stay-at-home mum, so they had a constant, wonderful influence from their mum. So it's probably more bit of internal guilt for me. And I think today it is possible to do it more differently, because I think, societally there's you have parental leave. I mean, when my daughter was born, I took one day off, and my wife already had 2 kids, young kids at home. I took one day
right.
off. I mean, unforgivable if you sort of look at it in the context of today's world, but that's how it was. I mean, today's society, one, allows things like parental leave and is understanding of work-life balance as a business objective, and also conscious and, a culture where it's okay not to be okay and to say that I'm not okay. In the generation that I grew up in, it was not okay to say you were not okay, and it was not okay to reveal any type of weakness, or I'm struggling with anxiety or self-doubt, or, I remember speaking to Stan Bromley, and he just constantly gave me a hard time. And I know now, because he believed I had such great potential and to push hard. And I went to him one morning, he was always in at 5 a.m. I went to his office, I said, Stan, with all the feedback you're giving me, I said, I really feel, in fact, maybe I'm never going to be able to be a GM. And I, of course, was crying out for some reassurance, a hug. He said, I'm not sure either. So you've really got to look in the mirror, step up,
Brutal.
and do more. I walk out the office, I'm like, fuck you. But really, he drove, he's like, I'm going to show you.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
of course I was looking, I'm an empath. I'm by nature a fragile being who, seeks empathy and reassurance and love. And so that was...
I'm with you.
That was important to toughen me up, because you can't be a leader, if you can't be like blancmange as a leader, you've got to have some steel in you. And so I'm sure he saw the need to develop more tenacity in me. And like, no, I'm not going to join your pity party, Simon. I'm going to toughen you up. It was not an easy way to learn and grow, but it was certainly effective. And I think today I try to model elements of it, and that I can be very direct in feedback and driven in my expectations, but I'm always doing it with my arm around, with my sort of human sense of, I care about you and I believe in you, which is why I'm asking so much of you.
Yeah. Feedback on the interview so far, Ben?
And you're telling you're doing a beautiful job.
Oh, thanks
Thank
very much.
so
That means so much. Yeah, but I hear you. There's, and I think I am with you on personality terms. Excuse me. We just did a thing on insights last week, in fact.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And one of the things that came out of that from my own perspective, and I see this in a lot of the journeys that I've had conversations with, is that I didn't know this, but actually one of the number one motivators of people, excuse me, is telling them that you can't do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just take that and go, I'll fucking show you, basically.
Right, just watch me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I get There's a balance again, right, to be had. And you used the words work-life balance, which is way more prevalent these days. But I also had a conversation with somebody once whereby they said we should stop calling it work-life balance and just call it balance. Because when you get the two working in tandem with each other, then there's some beautiful things that can happen.
Yeah, I remember probably like 10 or 15 years ago, I just came up with this statement that I talked to my leadership teams about as it was starting to come out about work-life balance. I said, well, it's not going to exist because we're running a hotel. I said, it's about getting comfortable with the imbalance and that work is life and life is work. And today I work 7 days a week. I don't take a day off. When I say I work, that means I'm doing something related to work. It can be emails or message or thinking strategically. That's okay with me because, I'm not working super long hours. I get up in the morning when I wake up. I don't set an alarm, and I want my body to naturally wake up. And Grace, my wonderful PA, knows not to set, I don't do early morning appointments because that's part of my living balance. People say, but Saturdays and Sundays, that's okay for me because I want to be on top. It's not I'm working 10 hours on a Sunday, but I'm going to get on top of my emails so I feel I have a jump on the week. And so getting comfortable with the imbalance and saying that imbalance is actually balance for me.
Yeah.
But I'm working all the time, but I also, if I don't feel like working, I can just leave my office and go to the gym or go for an afternoon nap. Or if I don't feel like coming into work one day, I don't have a boss as such who's managing that. So I have tremendous freedom. And so that imbalance becomes my balance.
Very good, very good. This is getting very philosophical, right up my street. But in any case, let's complete the journey. Back in the US, there's probably a song in there somewhere, but you're a GM now.
No. I'm a director of rooms in the US, and then I get transferred back to the UK in '99 as a hotel manager to open Four Seasons Canary Wharf. At the time when there was no Jubilee Line, no DLR projects out there, in Canary Wharf, they just built the HSBC Tower. A great experience, my first opening of a hotel. It's no longer a Four Seasons, but it's that on Riverside, Canary Riverside, with the sloped green roof, Philippe Starck design building. Amazing experience doing a pre-opening. Absolutely loved it, but was not there for long because as soon as we opened, the sort of regional vice president, who was John Stouse, who was then based at Four Seasons Park Lane, brought me back to Park Lane, from whence which I'd started in the late 80s as hotel manager. So I was a second-time hotel manager in Park Lane to John, who was a regional vice president, so he was managing a cluster of hotels. And again, to be back in Park Lane taught me a bunch of things. Firstly, be aware of your journey, because there was a ton of people when I went there 10 years after I'd first worked there who were still there, who remembered arrogant, overly ambitious, annoying young Simon. And so be aware of your journey because these paths cross and recross. And I had to work hard to undo and show the current iteration of Simon, who was a bit less arrogant, a bit less annoying, probably similarly ambitious. And then run that hotel, which, Park Lane Hotel, and, that level of operation, and success and a big financial ship, very important for the company, was a great lesson. And of course, I was desperate to be a GM and had jobs that came up, like when we were opening Four Seasons Hampshire, I was desperate to be a GM there, and I was kind of promised it, and then it didn't happen. So you get moments of disappointment. And then Antoine Corinthius, who was the president of Europe, Middle East, and Africa, called me and said, Simon, I know you're desperate to be a GM, right? I said, yes. He said, and you'll go anywhere? I said, yes. He said, okay, I've got the job for you. I said, okay. I said, where is it? He said, Doha, Qatar. I said, great, I'm in. He said, you don't have any questions? I said, well, just one. Where's Doha or where's Qatar? This is in 2001 or 2, so a long time ago. Qatar wasn't anywhere near as prominent as it is now. So we went home to Petswood, where I was living with my wife and 3 kids, and I'm sure just told me, hey, we're all moving to the Middle East.
Yeah, you can feel the collective eye roll.
There was not a lot of discussion either. I think it was like, this is what we're doing. And there, so youngest GM in Four Seasons. Everyone was like, wow, no one makes GM before 40 with Four Seasons. I was 33. How did you do it? And I started telling my story. Well, while you were doing A-levels and university and master's degrees, I was working. So if you just do the maths, I kind of advanced through those years more quickly. And so
Are you basically telling us that we should all reject education, Simon?
I would say follow your instinct. It's not. I mean, there is
Politics
not one path for all. I was totally fine for my kids not to go to university, but they all wanted to, and they all did really well, and that was the right path for them. And I think different in the, I was leaving school in the late 70s. It wasn't uncommon to not have a degree. Today it's the minimum price of entry. Everyone has a degree in arranging coffee table books or whatever it is. It's
very well done, Rosa.
Someone else, you can tell someone with a degree has done those. But for me, it just it wasn't the path.
Right. Yeah. So Doha, before Doha was a thing, really,
amazing
from a travel perspective.
Amazing, because it's a small kingdom, and the owner of the hotel, another mentor of mine, Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani, who became the Prime Minister of Qatar and today owns Connaught and Claridge's Maybourne Group, as well as One Hyde Park and Chelsea Barracks. He's a prolific investor. He was the foreign minister when I arrived. I remember interviewing with him in his office, and you're held outside the office doing a little Arabic coffee, and then the doors open, there's two men, and the doors are like 20 feet high. Two men, like in the movies, open these big doors. I walked into his office, put my hand out, started walking, and realized he's like 50 paces away. I'd started extending my hand too early. So I had to, it was literally a long way to his desk, to this massive office.
It's much like your entrance here today, Simon.
And I was waiting 3 days for this. I was sitting in the Sheraton in Doha waiting for this interview, and just every day getting up, shaving, putting my tie on and waiting, and having vision of my grandfather, who left England when he was 20 to go to China to make his fortune. It took him 3 months to get there on a boat, and I thought if he could do that in days where there was no support, no telephones, if he could do that, I can do this. So started a great adventure. Firstly, opening a hotel as a GM is the biggest privilege of any hotelier's life, and was probably the happiest time in my career, because you have total control, and you take it from a building site in the early years, work with the interior designers, the architects, all the sub-consultants to deliver a hotel, and bring a team together. So I was able to deploy everything I'd learned, observed, see, and knew, and now it was on me. This team was going to be a reflection of everything that I was and everything that I was able to represent. And we created just an enormous success. It was financially a huge success for the owner, for Four Seasons, helped put Qatar on the map, and was a really fun time, because suddenly I'm going from taking the train from Petswood to Victoria, missing the train, delayed trains, walking, pouring rain, to suddenly I get there and, I have a company Range Rover, I have a villa with a pool and domestic staff living in. I'm like, I've made it.
Special boy.
I'm at the top of the mountain, it was like, woohoo.
Yeah. That, a very, very interesting time for the region as well, because it was probably at the cusp of explosion at that point. Not necessarily just specifically Qatar, but UAE and the like, just putting themselves on the map from a tourism perspective. So to be able to ride that wave with that brand in that moment must have been pretty special.
Happiest time of my career, from a family perspective. Your kids were little, and it was just, time of opportunity, and you're living in a part of the world where you're an hour and a half to the Maldives or down to the Seychelles, or, to go into Damascus and, seeing the civilization, several thousands of years old in Syria. And so it was fascinating from a family perspective, from a career perspective. It was really amazing, and to be part of a country that was becoming something, because it just, was starting to deploy its hydrocarbon wealth, becoming enormously wealthy. So that results in huge infrastructure building. I was, there when Qatar won the bid for the World Cup, and the excitement for that and what it meant for the country. It was a marvelous time in every way.
Yeah. So how long were you there in that role?
9 years.
9 years?
Yeah.
Wow, so you really must have enjoyed.
I really loved it, enjoyed it. Probably too long to stay. I think sort of 5 years is about the sweet spot that I see now for a GM, because you're never as fresh, focused and diligent in the last few years as you are in the first few years. But I stayed there One, because, it was a nice place to live. It was also, the tail end of it, going through the breakdown of a 25-year marriage. So, profoundly painful and unhappy time, for me on a human level, and for, of course, all of us as a family. And so didn't want to bring other change. I had opportunities to leave a few years earlier, but as I was going through that, felt like the right thing to stay in Qatar.
Right. Yeah. So what happened next? We'll not explore marital breakdown on this podcast. That's not why we're here.
That's a different podcast.
Indeed.
So what happened next is, so I moved to Dubai. And I moved to Dubai during the time in Qatar, I'd also become a regional vice president. Which again, they said you can never be a regional vice president unless you've been a GM of more than one hotel and moved. I couldn't move the company. I didn't tell them why, but I was offered Istanbul and Cairo to be an RVP. I said no, I can't. So I thought maybe they wouldn't make me an RVP, but eventually they did. So I was an RVP in Doha, and then moved to Dubai to be the pre-opening regional vice president and general manager for Dubai Jumeirah Beach property, which again owned by Sheikh Maktoum bin Mohammed, so the third son of Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler. So we had incredibly powerful and supportive ownership group and the team that worked with them, which meant we developed an iconic hotel that, again, just became at the end of the day, we're in business and you've got to become a success. So we grew something, from nothing, a 200-bedroom hotel that ended up, turning over $100 million a year and being incredibly profitable as well as critically successful. And along that time living, in Dubai, Dubai is a land of opportunity, discovery, crazy place. I was 10, 11 years there, crazy place to be. But also, coincided with a change in my life. Daniela, who I'm married to now, came to live with me there. And a very exciting time to be, in Dubai, post-crisis, so it was real boom times. And then as a regional vice president, I was opening and overseeing hotels, in Bahrain and Kuwait, second one in Dubai, one in Abu Dhabi, game reserve in the Serengeti, Johannesburg, Seychelles. At various times, I had 4 or 5 hotels in clusters underneath me, and was really enjoying. And probably thought that in terms of seniority, RVP, regional vice president, is the sweet spot because you're still running a hotel, so you have the finger on the pulse and the adrenaline of being part of a business. But you're also managing a few other hotels, 4 or 5, and the GMs of those hotels. And I recognized that was a sweet spot, and I thought that is maybe it. It's a great journey, great place to finish. And then they asked me to be president. And so it was a surprise that they asked me, and I had some doubts about it. Not doubts that I would take it or not, but I remember speaking to Danny and my kids, and the doubts were around, would I still be relevant outside? Because I'm a hotelier, and still today, my DNA is that of a hotelier. So would I be relevant outside of a hotel and moving into a corporate office? But of course decided to take it, and went through another huge period of growth, and worked with executive coach and sort of some specific things I did to recalibrate how I managed, how I led, looking at things from a different perspective. I ended up having 17,000 people working for me in that job in 26 countries. So from being in one hotel and managing 600 people in that hotel and a few thousands in the collective others, it's suddenly the quantum became really, really big. And so you recognize you can't lead or manage by doing anything yourself. It's all through other people.
Yeah. And not bad for a failure, by the way. President.
It was
now.
at that moment that I thought, probably where I really started to relax in and live my life a bit differently. Like, okay, come on now.
Yeah, earned the right.
Made it.
Yeah.
There's a Robbie Williams poem at the end of one of his albums, like 30 minutes of silence at the end, and he was also kicked out of school at 16, and it said, "Hello, sir, remember me? I'm the boy that you said would never be, the boy that always played the fool, the boy that you said was a failure at school," and it goes on and on and on. The last word of the poem is said, "And so here I sit, in first class. Bollocks, sir, kiss my ass." And I kind of had that sort of feeling, okay, I've made it. Now, what does that mean? And then I learned this whole concept really through reading of the second mountain in life, and that, not everyone summits the first mountain. It depends on your desire and your journey and what you do. And, many people are happy doing a job, having their family, probably happier than I am in many ways, and they've finished their life somewhere at the first mountain. But if through success, and that can be success, as Mother Teresa and being a humanitarian, or it can be great wealth or commercial success or political success, but you get to summit the first mountain, that gives you a moment to stop and look down and realize that it's not about this feeling of being on the summit, it's the journey that led to it that was the joy. The journey was the destination. But then you also recognize that, like whenever you climb a mountain, you look around and there's another peak. So this sort of second mountain concept that there is more to life. And generally that second mountain is more about yourself. Like, maybe I should have some hobbies finally, or maybe I should start to be a better dad or a better husband or a better friend, or even have friends. I had 1,000 acquaintances, but never had any real friends because I didn't invest the time, or I wasn't in one place long enough to have them. So it was great arriving at success, and also helping me to realize that there's more and a different journey to life ahead as well.
Love that. Yeah. And I suppose we can come on to that in a second, of course, because that will complete your journey. Slightly conscious of time as well. But
we're okay. Let's keep going. And
all right. Yeah. All right. Cool. We talked about this off microphone. Maybe it was on microphone. I don't know. I can't remember. It all just blurred into one these days. But this kind of what you're really talking about is reinvention, right? Because I think I read somewhere. That sounds critical.
No. We need to pause. Right. Okay.
Right.
2 seconds. Make it be quiet.
Just run out of battery.
Okay. Yeah, reinvention. I read somewhere once upon a time that the average human being, if there is such a thing, reinvents themselves 4 to 5 times in their lifetime. And a lot of the time you don't know that that's happening. You just, as you said earlier on in the discussion, you go with the flow, you do the best you can in the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are moments where you can take the reins on that. And it sounds like this was one of those moments really whereby you had, yes, all of that sacrifice that we just discussed earlier on, all of the things that you kind of had to put to one side in order to make that first summit. That is the wonderful benefactor of all of that. And that's, to be celebrated without question. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who've worked for you over the years who would also celebrate that fact. Maybe some of the Portuguese guys earlier on, not so much. But so it then comes to, you've summited, and just tell me, if you would, what does president of Four Seasons actually mean? What are you actually in charge of at that time? So
you're president of a geographical region. So I was president for Europe, Middle East and Africa. So it was the biggest region in the company, but you're an operational president. So you're responsible for the 45 hotels, the 45 GMs, the collective 17,000 people that are within, and the operations of those hotels, the owner relationships, because they're all owned by different divisions, but different principals. And then also working with the development team on developing new deals and finding new Four Seasons. So it's an operational role of a geographic division, which is quite different to being the CEO of a whole company. As I've now learned, there is a distinct difference, and in many ways the Four Seasons job was a bigger job in terms of scope and quantum, but smaller in terms of that responsibility for the whole executive leadership team, for having the chief financial officer and chief people officer and CEO and chief commercial officer all reporting, into you. So it was a job where I was spending up to 200 days a year traveling around the hotels, meeting the teams, ensuring service delivery and standards, ensuring active development, ensuring presence and vibrant resonance of the culture of the company, and all based from a corporate office in Dubai, where I had a team of 20 people, in operations, in finance, in people and culture, and development, in legal, in design and construction development. There was a team in Dubai that what we called an area leadership team that supported me in that role.
Right. Yeah. So, and how long did you do that role for?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then, we're closing the curtain on the Four Seasons chapter of the story, but 30 5 years, more or less. It's
Yep.
35, is it?
34 and
Yeah.
a bit, I think. But
Yeah.
let's round it up to 35.
Yeah. So as an ex-recruiter, no longer do that, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
Is that you get somebody's CV in general terms, you get somebody's CV, and okay, we're not talking about somebody generally who's president or regional vice president or whatever, and somebody who's been in a company for that length of time, and the feeling is normally that they've probably had it too easy, really, or they're too comfortable and all of that kind of thing. But the thing where this differs for me, especially within your own journey, obviously having summited the mountain, but also the Four Seasons brand. With that recruitment head on, I remember rarely getting CVs of people who came from Four Seasons. And that comes back to, I think, probably what you were talking about earlier on, really around that, humanity first approach, is that one, nobody wants to leave because they're just having too good a time. They're progressing at the rate they want to progress at. But then also on top of that, you have the fact that it's the Four Seasons brand. And it's still, a lot of organizations around the world, I think, still look to them as, they're about as good as it gets when it comes to the luxury.
I think they are. I think they are and will continue to be in the near term the preeminent luxury hospitality brand in the world. And for me, it was an immense privilege and joy to spend those 3+ decades with them. And it's interesting, I was speaking to a few recruiters, over the past several months, have remarked to me exactly what you said, Phil, that you could never get anyone from Four Seasons. But today, everyone's in play. What changed? And therein lies the story of just a natural story of scale and growth. And as I said, Four Seasons was, and I think will continue to be, the leader. They do an amazing job, and they have a lot of blue sky in between them and anyone else who's coming close. But for me, it wasn't as special as it once was as an employee, as a leader, because I'd been part of a golden era of the company where it was smaller, where we managed in a different way, where I felt that the focus on people was different. And so it was just a slow process of moving towards that, and at the same time, the company also believing that I was not necessarily the right guy to take the next era of the company forward. And those sort of two prevailing views sort of dovetailed and led to me making a decision to move on.
Yeah, and that decision was initially retirement.
Well, I thought I'd run, I was 56, and so given I started just before 16, I thought I'd done 40 years. We all have sort of goals in life, and what would be possible for me to retire, and I'd kind of, whether it's accomplishment, achievement-wise, or financial stability and family security, I guess. So all those boxes were ticked. And I'd worked really hard, and I couldn't imagine working for anyone else other than Four Seasons. So I thought maybe I would do some advisory or consulting work. So, I went home. We have a little farm in Croatia. It's just a beautiful part of the world. We're close to the sea, but in the middle of a forest, and I love nature and trees, and learning a bit about farming and the land. So that was really attractive to me. So that's what I did, and honestly, I could still be there. I was really happy. I didn't get there and after a month say I'm bored and want to move on. I got there and I think had I stayed there, would still be really happy. My wife today is like, why did you leave? Why aren't you here? But I started to get calls. I didn't reach out to anyone. I started to get calls from several global hotel companies and some really iconic figures within the industry who'd created, led, or owned companies that approached me and said, would you consider being CEO? And again, maybe that little imposter syndrome within me. I'd never thought of myself as CEO material. I knew I was a great operator, and I knew as president I could lead a big operating division of a company, but I'd never seen myself as, being a CEO. So when I started getting not one, but several very valid reach outs, and I started meeting with these people, it sort of built this feeling with me that, hey, why not? Why would you, what a nice way actually to round out a career, to run a company. And so I just really did a very clear remit for myself of what would great look like. And that went from everything that was important. So geography was important. You know, some of these jobs were in America, and I wanted to be in Europe, ideally in London. Things that were important. The money was not important. In any of these jobs, you're going to get, you know, relatively well paid, but first in my life, it wasn't a driving priority. I wanted to work for a family-founded company, as Four Seasons was, because I knew that would get the best out of me, and some of the companies were private equity backed and larger, more dynamic, probably paying a lot more, but for me, that was important. I wanted a company that was small enough for me to shape and to bring meaningful change to. I wanted a company that understood luxury, but needed someone to take them to the next level. And, you know, Corinthia ended up as I, you know, filtered. And it's not that all of the 7 wanted me and offered me jobs. Some of them did. But as it filtered down, Corinthia became the front runner because it ticked most of the boxes that, you know, I'd sort of set out were my priorities for me to come back to work for.
Yeah. Well, and as we spoke about earlier on, they're at such a really interesting point in their journey as well, in terms of the direction of travel is, I think you used the word disruptive within that luxury space as well as, you know, exploring new territories that they've not been in before.
You know, firstly, they had this hotel that we're sitting in now that became a great success, but, you know, there was also a confusion in the narrative for Corinthia. I mean, firstly, that it's, you know, founded by a charismatic guy, Alfred Pisani, our chairman, that founded it in the 60s, and what he's been able to do to grow and establish the spirit of Corinthia and company was really attractive to me. And then Simon Naudi, who was running the company as CEO and is now on the board and group managing director, you know, great commercial minds and a great entrepreneurial spirit, and had built a really attractive pipeline of deals that was very attractive to me, coming in knowing that, hey, in my first year, I could be opening these hotels. Timing is everything. You know, I don't really take the credit for New York, Brussels, and Bucharest, because they were deals, you know, led by Simon and the previous team. But of course, I've joined now and have, you know, sort of birthed the babies, if you like, and, you know, working to help make them work world class with the leaders of those businesses. So it all just sort of, you know, it all sort of pointed to something that could be quite exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. And we sit here and things are exciting. I mean, I was only just on your LinkedIn profile yesterday. I do some research sometimes.
Yeah.
And New York, just having not long opened its doors, but already sounds like it's got off to a flyer.
Off the charts. I mean, it was the Met Gala on Monday, and, you know, we had the who's who of the fashion and entertainment industry there. And it was I think I put it on one of my Insta stories, but there was a great cover of Condé Nast Traveler, which is probably the lead along with Travel and Leisure, leading hotel, you know, leisure travel magazines in the world, and had a great thing saying, the star of this year's Met Gala is a hotel.
Nice.
Amazing tagline. So, and what New York has done for the narrative for us as a brand is hugely accelerating, because it's America, it's New York City, and, you know, as a company, we hadn't opened a hotel since this one 12 years ago.
Right.
So it started to say, okay, Corinthia are serious, and not only are they serious, but they're able to do a hotel like this. And it wasn't our capital, we didn't develop it. We did that in partnership with the Rubin brothers, or the scion of that family, Jamie Rubin. And so we're showing that we can work with development partners to develop a world-class hotel. So it started to change the narrative from the consumer. Okay, Corinthia, now we always knew London was nice, but now I'm seeing, you know, New York and Brussels and Bucharest. Started changing with the travel industry and press, that we became much more prominent. And also with the investment community, as we are looking now and, you know, are actively involved in dozens of deal discussions, the investment community starts to take us more seriously, because they're seeing short-term traction of what we're delivering in terms of deals. You know, we'll open Rome at the end of this year. We're under construction in Riyadh and Doha and the Maldives. And, you know, we have about 30 other deal plays and discussions which are in progress as we speak, some of which will not happen, of course, but some of which will. And the goal is to sort of elevate and grow Corinthia to be a global luxury player. And, you know, the April issue of Hotels magazine, front cover was a picture of our Brussels hotel, and a really important tagline. It said, "True contender, Corinthia Hotels challenges luxury's usual suspects."
Thanks
me,
very much.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. We're not saying we're the best. We're far away from, but we're aspiring to play in that Premier League group. Be aware. If you feel something on your ankle, that's us biting at it. We're ambitious, we're driven, we know we have a unique offering, but we're also humble and realistic to know that we have a long way to go to be up there with the great hotel brands like Four Seasons and Rosewood and Mandarin, but we're on the way.
No doubt you are. Look, an absolute pleasure to sit here and chew the fat with your journey. I wish you guys all the very best with disrupting a space which is ripe for disruption as well, I think. Yeah, I mean, I suppose one question maybe before we go. You've been very kind with a couple of stories already, but are we leaving any golden nuggets out there? Any stories, funny stories, scary stories, anything from your career so far where you look back on and go, God, how did I get through that?
No.
Okay, bye.
I'm trying to think, even when I saw it in the pre-thing, right, I can't think of...
I mean, look, the opening doors that size and having about half an hour to get to the...
They were,
that's pretty good.
Part of it,
That's pretty good.
I don't have a real zinger at the end, no.
Nah, shocker. Oh, well, wipe it then, it's fine.
So you've got to leave something for next time, right? So if I give you...
Next time, very good.
If we're dating and I'm giving you all on the first date, you're not going to respect me.
I mean, that is true. Simon, I did have a parting statement, actually, which was very simply this. Not bad for a 15-year-old failure from Carlisle. That is, your journey is absolutely inspirational, and I'm so, so grateful that you made the time to have a chat with me today.
Thank you, Phil. Real pleasure to chat.
Thank you. That's a wrap.
Thank you very much.